You are listening to Panther Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
It's not true. That's impossible.
What's up, everybody? This is Mark from Making Tracks. This is episode 34, and with me today, as always, is the man, the legend, the Yoda to my Yaddle, Mark Newbold. How's your week been?
The week's been good. It's flown by as usual. Of course, last week we had 2 episodes, so we had a busy week on the site. Loads of news. Obviously, we're going to talk about stacks of news and stuff. Happy days. How about
good?
you?
Yeah, I took a shot of bleach the other day, and that seemed to sort me right out. No, all good. I am eagerly awaiting, with one ear to the door, my Skywalker Saga box set coming from Amazon, and actually a couple of extra Rise of Skywalker Blu-rays. So they're all coming today, hopefully. I've been looking and tracking it, but it hasn't arrived yet.
This week has been weird. I've not had much stuff come through this week because the postman's hardly been out. Although I will say the only thing I have had of note, and I'm looking at it right now, I've had a Funko Pop The Child Mandalorian box turn up, which is really nice because it's not stood on its end like it normally is. It's oblong because he's so teeny tiny. So I have had that turn up, which was nice. The world has changed a lot in the last few weeks. Events that were once physical events that we would all go to and meet up and catch up like we all loved doing are now going online. So there are a few things coming up. We've got 2 things. There's Hasbro. We're doing a Fan Friday live stream on Friday the 1st. Hopefully some good reveals there. Patrick and Eric from the Hasbro team are going to be talking at that one. Of particular interest to Phantom Tracks followers, my former co-host on Making Tracks, Dave Tree, of Farthest From and all the cool stuff, he had got, on the 3rd of May, the 22nd running of Farthest From. Of course, with everything that's going on, that's not feasible and not safe, so he's not doing that. But he is still running Farthest From, but it's now Farthest From live. So it's, with the world in lockdown, it means we can still do a Farthest From. It'll be a Facebook series of live activities and panels on the Facebook Farthest From Facebook page. Fingers crossed we'll speak to Dave very soon and get some information on that before the show launches. But what do you think, before we talk about Rebelthon, which is of course of interest to you as a Rebel Legion guy, what do you think about these events sort of changing into online events? It keeps the brand going, it keeps us interested, something to do. It's a good thing, isn't it?
It's a good thing. It's everybody just trying to adapt and work with what they can, and I think it's definitely a positive. Obviously, it's not as ideal in terms of being actually at the event, but this also offers slightly different opportunities. You know, if there's an interview or a panel being held, you've got a greater chance of maybe asking a question and it being answered, and also I think, people are also being a little bit more relaxed sometimes. I think sometimes when you're on a panel on a stage, it can feel a bit formal and a bit, but this can feel a little bit more fun and friendly and just down to earth, like you're having a chat with your mate, like me and you do.
Exactly. And one of the nice things about it is, if I pick Farthest From as a great example, if Dave's doing a live event and he wants to get guests in the room, especially if it's an international guest, it's travelling them in or flying them in from a foreign country, which of course is difficult to do at the moment, and all the logistics of doing that. But at least in the sense of doing an online Farthest From, or Hasbro doing an online fan event, or Rebelthon, which we'll talk about in a minute, you can literally have guests from anywhere in the world, time difference permitting, and have everybody see those people and interact with them. It does give different opportunities. And of course, in time, Farthest From will carry on as a live event. Rebelthon might become something more going forward. It just gives some cool options for us to still be involved in events. I know on the site, our events calendar is always, this event, this Showmasters event is happening in London today, and this little book event's happening in Newcastle, or whatever it might be. Now, looking at the event stream on the side of the page and at the tab at the top, a huge amount of them are either postponed, reorganised, or now there's the option to list them as being moved online, and so now there's more and more events becoming online events.
Farthest From is always good fun, and it's a great atmosphere anyway, so I hope it's a great event, and I'm going to hopefully make an appearance, or at least stop by and see what's going on, so it'd be good fun.
Definitely. You've got Farthest From 22 next week, Sunday. Hasbro Fan Friday is, as the title suggests, on Friday. Rebelthon. Now, this is something new to me. They announced in the week their first guest, Vanessa Marshall, and hopefully other guests will be announced as time progresses. What do you know of this?
So the Rebelthon is presented by Rebel Legion, and it's basically a celebration of community, giving, and hope. And I think everybody needs a little bit of hope right now. So on May 3rd, Rebel Legion is going to host a 12-hour long kind of webinar, stream and marathon on Facebook. And the aim is to raise money for UNICEF. So it's going to be a mixture of interviews like with Vanessa Marshall. I think Brian Herring was announced the other day as well. And also there's going to be kind of content created by Rebel Legion members. It's a global thing. So for those who don't know, the Rebel Legion is basically the second largest Star Wars costume group in the world. So you've got the 501st, who do all the bad guys, the Imperials, the Stormtroopers. The Rebel Legion that I'm a member of, they do all the good guys' costumes. So, Luke, Han, Chewie, Anakin, up to a point, and Jedi and stuff like that. And basically we're very similar. So, we do the same kind of stuff. We go visit hospitals during, the weekdays and stuff like that, support charity events, make our own costumes and try and raise money through, basically our passion of Star Wars. It's going to be kind of like a nice mixture of content. I know at the moment we're still trying to put together the schedule to factor in as many different territories as possible. So I believe it's starting at 12 p.m. Eastern Central Time.
That's about 5 p.m. for us, isn't it? That should work out just nice.
And then it's going to go through the night background. So hopefully we're going to have people from Australia to Austria to UK to Chile to United States and everywhere else. It's free. It's accessible via the rebellegion.com Facebook page, and hopefully it will then run up to midnight of May the 4th. So as Star Wars Day starts, this will kind of hopefully wrap up, and hopefully by the time it wraps up, we'll have raised a lot of money for UNICEF.
Next weekend is going to be very, very busy for Star Wars fans, online and personally. We've all got our own projects that we're doing, and stick with Phantom Tracks. We've got news coming up all through the site. People who read the site will maybe have noticed, and hopefully have noticed, that as well as reviewing the latest episodes of Clone Wars, the latest episodes of Mando when they're coming out, we've also been going back into the archives and reviewing some older stuff and pulling out older reviews that we've had on the site and previous sites that we've done before. So there's plenty of content coming, old book reviews and all sorts of stuff. So stay tuned. There's lots and lots of content coming.
Hi, this is Neil Scanman. You're listening to Panther Tracks.
We ran on last week's episode a competition asking you to listen to episode 32, which was the first of 2 episodes with Lee Towersey. And in that interview, he told us which his favourite droid that he built. The choices were a Twin Towers droid, a photocopier droid, or a track droid. I'm certain that most people who entered thought that they were made-up names, but they weren't. The correct answer was C, track droid. We contacted Lee this morning. He picked a random number. We correlated that number to a person, and the person was Amanda Trelfer. So, Amanda, we'll be getting in touch with you very, very soon to get the details from you to send you your prize. The prize, of course, is a copy of The Rise of Skywalker on Blu-ray. Many thanks to Disney and their promotional partners for helping us sort out this competition. And stay tuned, we've got more competitions running very, very soon.
Nice one, Amanda.
Hi, this is Steve Grad from Pawn Stars. I approve and I authenticate Phantom Tracks.
This Friday, the latest episode of The Clone Wars dropped. This was episode 10 of season 7, The Phantom Apprentice. Have you had a chance to watch it?
Yeah, because it was, I managed to watch it pretty early on and then watched it again because it was so good, how could you not? And then as everybody starts talking about it online, last week with Old Friends Not Forgotten, fandom and the internet went nuts because everyone was just blown away by it. And then this week, I've written the review for the site, and there's people, members of the team and fellow fans who've been sending in their reviews. It's going to be a real bumper review for this episode. Just I had to watch it again, just to get in order the opening, because and you probably picked up on this as well. I loved the opening where last week you had the green Lucasfilm logo and the fanfare hit, and then you went into the narration, and then the episode started, and this episode just black screened you, like Deathly Hallows Part 2, just dropped you straight back into the action. But it had that musical intro that was basically the opening music from Close Encounters, and I just thought, and I put it in the review, it was like, so for fans who were fans then, when Star Wars and Close Encounters came out very close together, and there weren't that many sci-fi films. You're falling over sci-fi and genre films now. It's just different. But then it was something else, and Lucas and Spielberg at the top of the game. It just felt like lots of clever little nods to me. That's how it read to me. It won't read the same to somebody 10 years, 20 years, 30 years younger, but that's how it read to me.
I'll be honest, I totally didn't pick up on that. I haven't actually seen Close Encounters that many times, so...
Yeah.
But the way it felt to me was, oh my God, this could have literally just been one long feature episode from last week. It just picked straight up. I haven't even really kind of collected my thoughts on it. Part of it, and I think this is where we've always kind of wanted to go, where suddenly the events of what we're seeing on the Clone Wars is interacting with the events that actually happened on Revenge of the Sith. And they did it in some really nice touches. I think not necessarily super subtle, but I think definitely done in a way whereby it gives you a good idea of a timeline of what's going on and whereabouts actually we are in the film. You know, if you have a hollow kind of message and meeting between Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, that's just as he's going off to face General Grievous. So, you know, we know where they are. They've rescued the Chancellor, and we now know that Anakin's found out that Padme is pregnant. He's been asked to kind of spy on, shall we say, quote unquote, the Chancellor, and and obviously Obi-Wan's been charged to go and face down General Grievous. So we know that we're getting close to the Order 66 time. Again, I think visually, this is the most stunning episode I've seen. Right at the end, just jumping right to the end, where Ahsoka is facing down Maul in that throne room, and that window kind of blows in. They're both stood there like unaffected by the glass and the ash and the cinder and stuff like that. It just looked amazing, and the lighting and the texture was just awesome.
You get something like this, where you've got Revenge of the Sith that's been out 15 years, and Lucas has had it in his head for way longer than that, and there's plot lines and all these things building, and that scene, it's immutable. It can't be changed. And then Filoni and co come along and they write a storyline that runs concurrently with it and doesn't contradict anything. It only firms it up. There's, in this, one of the things I write in my review is that it's kind of brilliant in that the Force, Yoda and Mace both say it at different points in Revenge of the Sith that our ability to see the Force has been diminished. We're not seeing things properly. It's shutting off to us. We're not connected to it like we should be. So they know something's wrong, and they know the Force is out of balance and things are changing. Palpatine is seeing the Force clearer than ever, so he's steering everything. So in this, you've got the moment where Maul says to Ahsoka, basically, I'm paraphrasing, he basically says, I didn't want you here, I wanted Anakin here, because I know that he's the apprentice that Palpatine's always wanted, and I basically want to screw that up for him, because he turned me over, so I'm going to make his plans go to pot. That's the way it read to me. It's his own Revenge of the Sith. He's trying to get Anakin out of the way because that screws things up for Palpatine. Now he says it. Oh, the Jedi are already gone. You just can't see it. If my calculations are correct, it's already happened. So like you just said, Order 66 is about to kick off, and he's aware, he seems very aware of all these things. He doesn't say that, so he might not specifically be referring to Order 66, but he knows something's going on.
I was going to say, that's the one thing that I was wondering whilst I was watching this, was actually how much did Sidious actually explicitly lay out to him, and how much of it is basically probably down to the kind of rhetoric that Sidious was kind of spouting throughout his training about how the time will come when the Jedi will be kicked to the curb and all that. Because it's quite interesting that, as you say, at this point in time, the Jedi are really struggling to kind of really read the Force for what it is. And then you've got Darth Maul who's sticking his finger in his mouth and putting it up and going, the wind's changing. This is not going to go the way that you think it's going to go. I think that's quite a really clever thing. And as you say, his whole plan, and I thought it was quite interesting, the whole reason behind the Mandalorian invasion, that was literally just to get Skywalker in that throne room where Ahsoka is and to take him out. Now, do you think that is because he wanted to just screw up Sidious's plans, or do you think he wants to basically go back to Sidious and say, your chosen apprentice has failed, I've bested him, choose me?
It's something I say in the review, which took me longer to write than probably any review I've ever written. I rewrote it about 4 times because every time I thought through the logic train, and I think it's the same old thing about Star Wars. It's like Ben says it, certain point of view. It's all from a certain point of view. you will look at that Maul-Ahsoka interaction differently than I will. I was speaking to Becca Benjamin, who contributes to Panther Tracks Online, and she read it in a totally different way to me. I don't think anybody's right. I don't think anybody's wrong. I think it is that whole point of view thing. To me, it reads that Ahsoka is offered. She doesn't know it. And I don't think Maul specifically knows it, but we know it because we watch it. We've got the overview that, you know, that they don't. If Ahsoka accepts Maul's offer and they work together to defeat Anakin, then that scuppers Sidious's plans. Not completely. The Empire's still going to fall. You know, the Jedi's still going to be in desperate bother. But Anakin wipes out all the younglings. That's the future of the Jedi gone. You take Anakin out, he can't do that. You know, there's lots of things that if you take Anakin out, he can't do. He can't fight Ben and all the things. He doesn't become Darth Vader. He becomes a different Darth Vader. And that's another thing, you know. A lot of people online have been really sniffy about the fight between Ahsoka and Maul in that she wouldn't beat Darth Maul. And the thing I said was, okay, if you step back and go, okay, you take Phantom Menace Maul before Ben beats him, right? Ben is a Padawan, about to become a Jedi Knight, but he's a Padawan. He's a bit older than Ahsoka, but Ahsoka's been through so much and she's learnt so much, and we don't know what Ben learned before Phantom Menace, so it's not like for like. But Maul at that point he's a complete person, let's put it in that sense, right? So when he gets chopped in half, he shouldn't survive, but he does, through force of will, Mother Talzin, all the other things that make him come back to life. Darth Vader is about to lose the rest of his remaining limbs. So Anakin Skywalker in the metal suit that we know as Darth Vader, and Anakin Skywalker looking like Anakin always did, just been invested and given the name by Palpatine, are two different propositions, because Palpatine says it to Yoda, he'll become stronger than both of us. Palpatine knows the rule of two will mean that he will die in his sleep just like he killed Plagueis, and that he will succeed him. But he also knows that metal Darth Vader isn't strong enough to do that. He keeps him at arm's length, but he's not strong enough to do it. He's not a match for the Emperor in that sense, in that moment. So there's all these different potential matchups, and I didn't like the way that people were like, oh, Maul wouldn't lose to her. Look at how savage she is. Look at what a scrapper she is. She's like Rey. She reminds me of Rey. They're very similar. They're scrappers. They don't give it. They won't stay down. They're Jack Russells. Ahsoka's been given the classic Star Wars. You know, it's Vader at best been offering Luke his hand. It's Kylo on the Supremacy offering Rey his hand. It's Dooku offering Obi-Wan his hand in Attack of the Clones. And the good guy always says no, because you've got to fight for the right thing and not take the dark side and stuff. And yet there's all this horse trading going on where if Ahsoka had accepted Maul's offer, there's a slim chance for the galaxy. And I'm really wobbling on here, but that's why I think it's brilliant writing on Filoni's part, because she can't accept his deal. Logically, from the flow of the Revenge of the Sith story, she can't accept his deal. But the fact that you've got a Sith in Maul with his plot and machinations going on here, and the war is exploding behind them, literally, on Mandalore and everywhere, and then you've got Sidious with his plans. He's seeing the Force so clearly at this point, Sidious. He's intercepting, and so's Maul's probably seeing it clearer than most of the Jedi as well, because it's swaying their way. Even he's outmaneuvered by Sidious, because just as he thinks he's going to get Anakin and Ben to Mandalore and do what he wants to do, Sidious thinks, actually, I'm going to get kidnapped on Coruscant, so they've got to come to me. You know, so he's just outmanoeuvring them every which way you like. I think it's brilliant writing. Filoni, just hats off. It's just genius writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Maul has got those robotic legs, and Ahsoka, we don't know how much she has or hasn't kind of kept up her sparring, or Maul for that matter. And when I watched it, because this was a fight that was mocapped by Ray Park, wasn't it? And I think it was Lauren Mary Kim, I think, who was the stunt woman on Fast and Furious 7. There's actually a different kind of mechanics behind, I think, this compared to all the other fights, which are probably more animated. Yeah. It did feel a little bit clunky, but that came from both of them, and I wonder if that was just down to their slightly rustiness.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be fair. We don't know if Mandalore has like WD-40 and if Darth Maul's legs are going to seize off or something. I mean,
that's a good point. Well, I mean, Ahsoka says it, doesn't she? Yeah. So you're lucky it's me here, not Anakin, because he'd have took you out. Because that was the thing. The fighting that Maul did, there's a lot of flourishes, there's a lot of jumps and twists and stuff, but it didn't really feel like they were there to connect. Yeah.
They're more there just to kind of just push Ahsoka back, I think, and probably just to get in the corner, because ultimately he wanted her to join him for his reasons, and she decides to join him because I think basically she just wants to get as much information out of him about, you know, why he thinks Anakin Skywalker is going to be this apprentice to Sidious and who Sidious is. I mean, because really, you think that the last time that we saw Ahsoka and Anakin together, he was still very kind of chipper and smiley and chatty and what have you, and there was no real hint about what's going to happen. So you could imagine if that was you and somebody just said, that guy who's just given you back your lightsabers and's been really jovial for the last however long you've known him is going to become the apprentice, the Dark Lord of the Sith, you're not going to believe him. It's going to take a lot to kind of really, I think, be swayed by that initially, and you're going to want to find out more. Now, Maul is always, I think, he's the architect of persuasion. I think he plays on the fears of people, but also he always keeps stuff back. He is like Sidious in respects, like he's keeping the information back from Ahsoka and just reeling her in just a little bit by little bit, manipulating the whole events of the Mandalorian planet, really, just to get what he wants, which is fascinating. And like you said, it's definitely...
It's wheels within wheels, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like when you actually sit down with somebody who has basically discounted the prequels for just being not very good, and you actually have to play out and explain to them actually how clever this was and how clever Palpatine's plan and all the interactions about and bits of point where he kind of leverages his influence and gets what he wants. And then people start to understand that actually, on one level, Phantom Menace is arguably a kid's film, but then on other levels, it's so much more deeper than that. This episode's got this in spades as well in a similar kind of way.
100%. It's brilliant. It's the prequel trilogy anyway is fantastic plotted. You know, Lucas started off with Cliff Notes and he knew where he wanted to go with it. He got the bullet points essentially and then built it up. I'd love to know, Sam Witwer has alluded to it this week, that George has been sending notes to Filoni. Can only imagine, because it's George's last big project and it was very close to his heart. I'd love to know. I really would. I hope there's an insider interview or a StarWars.com interview or somewhere gets it where somebody sits down with George, preferably Filoni, and interviews him and says, right, what did you think of this? What did you think of that? I mean, the previous episode was fantastic in its cinema approach and just everything about it and the threat and peril. This was so different, but just even more. And it's just... I love Revenge of the Sith and just the road's not taken, and this is one of those. And just to build, because you look at Ahsoka, I mentioned Becca again, we were talking online, and I said something about how her belief in Anakin fuels her rage to fight more, because she's got to be at the top of her game to fight Maul. Anybody does. But she's like, no, it can't be true. You know, like Padme, when Ben comes and says he's turned to the dark side, he's killed younglings, and this hasn't happened yet, but, you know, it's coming. And she's like, no, it's not true, I can't believe it. But when you watch that scene, it's better acted than people give it credit for, because she knows it's true. And she has to go to Mustafar to see it for herself. But here, Ahsoka's like, no, you're lying. Jedi can only see in black and white now. The Sith can see the shades of grey. They can see the gaps between everything. The Jedi can't. They're not seeing the Force correctly. So to me, at an earlier juncture in the Clone Wars, when the Force wasn't all going out of whack, Ahsoka might have looked at what Maul was saying, given different circumstances, and gone, let me talk to Master Anakin about it. Master Anakin, he's saying this, that and the other, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, there might be a way here for us to stop this war. And it's not just black hats, white hats, good guy, bad guy. I can only follow the light. I can't follow you. Yeah, but this guy is giving us a backdoor way to stop the war. If you could see that. But she can't. And there's almost a regret. It's brilliantly animated as well. And Whitworth just knocks it out of the park with this one. You know, you can almost see the regret. He's almost like, oh, we're going to have to fight this one out again, aren't we? Yeah. You know what I mean? I loved it.
That final battle before he gets captured, the staging was really cool. I think with the use of all those triangles made out of the iron girders and stuff, I think they were trying to kind of almost make some kind of connection to the Ahsoka Vader fight from Rebels. The triangles because, I mean, obviously shapes in films, they do have connotations and meanings behind it. And triangles are an interesting shape anyway, so it kind of almost looked like it was a temple-based environment that they were in. That's how I felt anyway.
I'd not picked up on that, but yeah, you're right. It definitely was that triangular sort of pyramid structure, wasn't it? It reminded me of later on in Sith, when Anakin and Ben are fighting on Mustafar, and they have that. Do you remember that the behind the scenes video in a moment, and they broke down that 1 minute of film that cost like $250,000, and they broke down all the effects, and they were on that thin beam that was wobbling around over the lava, and it kind of reminded me of that, which of course in chronology hasn't happened yet. It's still a few hours ahead, I guess. Or
we're only halfway through this arc, and I'm curious actually to kind of see actually what the the lasting effect is of this siege is going to have on the Mandalorian people and the culture, because I'm kind of thinking, well, this is possibly a good opportunity to really nudge the Clone Wars era Mandalorians to meet the Mandalorian era Mandalorians. Does that make sense? Got to be, and you kind of see that. I mean, they mentioned about how in the first episode that the longer the siege goes on, the worse it's going to be for the inhabitants. And then you see in this episode, you've got the clones who are trying to, evacuate the civilians because there's a battle going on around them, and the civilians are kind of like, we don't take orders from clones and all that kind of stuff, and weren't particularly happy. So I'm just curious about that, because there was definitely two stories, and everybody is focusing on the Ahsoka Maul one, quite rightly so, but actually the clones Mandalorian story that's going on at the same time is also quite interesting. It's definitely worth kind of like paying attention to, I think.
I'm Anthony Daniels, and you are listening to Panther Tracks. Well done.
Okay, so a couple of listeners' questions. We've got a nice question here from John Hoey from the Resistance broadcast. He basically wants our thoughts on whether the next Star Wars film will or should use a main theme and the intro crawl that we've used in the last 9 saga films.
It's a tricky one. I think Solo had a brilliant opening. I love the opening of Solo, with the logo and the fanfare. But when they had the intro writing on about gangs and stuff and the underworld and all that malarkey, and coaxium being so expensive, as that was coming up on the screen, part of me was thinking they could have put this in a crawl. But then when I thought about it logically, I thought, no, that needs to have its own vibe. Rogue One doesn't have any kind of crawl, because basically Rogue One's crawl is the same as A New Hope's crawl, basically, isn't it? Other than the line of rebel spies have successfully stolen the plans of the secret battle station of the Death Star and all that. That's the only bit that you would take out from the crawl. The rest of it's essentially the same, because they're bumper to bumper, aren't they? So I think you should have the Star Wars fanfare. I think Star Wars does need that in there somewhere, but maybe the closing music, at the end of a film, it kind of needs that. It is the Star Wars theme, isn't it? But as for the crawl, I don't know. The Clone Wars did such a good job with the narration. That wouldn't work in cinema, because that's kind of like a radio trope more than a visual thing. So, and these episodes of the Clone Wars that we've just talked about, they've had Old Friends Not Forgotten, had the Lucasfilm logo, and then it had the Clone Wars logo receding, and then the narration. The next episode just went straight into the action. You kind of think, is the final episode of the Clone Wars going to have an opening crawl? Or, you know what I mean? I don't know. I think it's good that they keep it unique to the film. So future films, if you're doing, if they do 10, 11 and 12 in 20 years' time, obviously, yes, crawl and opening fanfare. But if they do a new trilogy, completely separate from the Skywalker saga, which it will be, then I don't know, it kind of feels like it needs to be. I'm saying this, and as I'm saying it, I'm thinking it through. Let's say they make a High Republic trilogy. The High Republic comes out in August, and people really click with it, and they do an animated show, and people really get behind it, and the metrics are good, and the numbers are good, and Lucasfilm were like, there's something in this, let's make a trilogy. And they announced a Star Wars trilogy at, Celebration Luton in 2023. And they decide to do it, and director comes in, whoever that may be, and they go, this feels like Phantom Menace epic. This is a big era of Star Wars. I think this film needs an opening crawl, episode 1 or whatever they call it. You know what I mean? The Phantom Sausage or whatever they want to call it. And then it has a crawl and the music, and it just gives it that weight, because I know people get weird about this and think it doesn't matter. It matters to me. Star Wars film starting with that, the 20th Century Fox fanfare, just still doesn't feel quite like a Star Wars film. It just feels like it needs that.
Yeah, but I think part of that is because of the musicality of it.
There's a very good reason.
Yeah, because that fanfare and the opening Stars fanfare basically are in the same key. So it is almost like you're missing the first 12 bars of the main theme, which is quite a curious thing. It was genius by Williams to do that in the first place. But actually, I suppose nobody really thought about what happened if Lucasfilm gets brought out, and arguably now they could do it. I would be quite happy if they were to run that underneath a Lucasfilm logo.
They've never found a good bit of music for Lucasfilm.
No, exactly. And I mean, there's always something poignant, I think, about having silence before kind of that big blast. And actually, that's where it works really well with Rogue One, because it's just you're straight in. Pictures and vision kind of come up at the same time with that real kind of nice horn blast. I suppose you've got to think about actually the role in which the crawl itself actually fills. It basically, as you said, the Solo had that kind of prologue cyan text filled out, a bit of a backstory, which is basically what you would put in a crawl. And that's what it's there for. It's there just to fill out a little bit of what's happened off screen and so people roughly know where they are when the story starts. I guess it might be one of those things that I could see them just saying, if we do 10, 11 and 12, then we do a crawl. But any other Star Wars properties probably won't have a crawl. Because if you look at the Solo logo and you look at the Rogue One logo and how they appear on screen, it's a derivative of the main Star Wars logo and that kind of, flying through space kind of thing. So, and it's like the Clone Wars. It's very similar, but it's not exactly the same. I wouldn't be surprised if they do something like that. I mean, maybe with a High Republic, and if they go down the cinematic route, they could do something totally different. It all comes down to what you consider and what each person thinks the DNA of Star Wars actually is. How important is that crawl and that fanfare? Or how important is it to have something similar to that because that's kind of almost a trope from the franchise?
Yes.
Or if it's just let's be careful when I say this, is it also possibly a way of negating a bit of lazy storytelling and potentially not necessarily having to have a massive chunk of exposition in the first 15, 20 minutes to explain where the hell we all are? Because that'll be the thing with High Republic. You've got to remember that these movies need to be made to the wider audience, and it's us fans who need to pick through the bones to get the more meat off of it where we've always wanted. So therefore, a High Republic film, the average casual moviegoer, will need some kind of preamble, the same way as The Force Awakens did. You look at The Force Awakens, it's a lot more kind of expositionally heavy from a wider perspective, painting that bigger picture than I think at least the original trilogy crawls ever were. So we probably haven't really kind of answered that one way or another, but I think it will depend. And I think that's the thing with the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. I do miss the Fox logo and the Fox fanfare, but I think the sequel trilogy kind of proved that actually you don't necessarily need that. I mean, they kind of kept it as close as they could do. So they had the Lucasfilm logo, you had a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You then had what was it, 3.5 seconds worth of black and silence, and then you're straight into the kind of a fanfare. So that for me worked.
One thing I will say though, I think Star Wars needs whoever makes a Star Wars film, and I think it was borne out by the music for the sequel trilogy. The music was beautiful, the music we got was fantastic. Good grief, do we miss the London Symphony Orchestra. I mean, just you listen to the opening fanfare from Phantom Menace, that absolutely burst the speakers to bits. Williams was so pleased with the Phantom Menace opening, he used it for Clones and Sith. That opening, you listen to them on the new versions, on the newer films, and they sound like MIDI versions. There's no thump
I was going to say, there's a tightness, for lack of a better term, the opening note, especially in The Force Awakens, that's where I noticed it more, and I need to probably just go back and just listen to the other two. The Force Awakens, it felt like somebody was strangling the orchestra because it was so tight and it was pitched up higher. And from what I recall, from possibly the behind the scenes, or it might have been actually the audio commentary, that was a deliberate thing. And I mean, obviously you've got to take into consideration it's a different orchestra. I think, it was done in LA, so it's a different environment and possibly a different mixer. But also you've got a different director and will have their own kind of perspective. It didn't quite feel right. It was just a little bit too pitchy for my liking.
Yeah, totally agree. So thanks, John.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
We've got a second question from Alan Wills.
Yes, Alan basically asks, will they have to reduce the number of tickets for future Star Wars celebrations to prevent overcrowding and introduce virtual queues only, so no in-person queues? Yeah, so that is a good question. There's got to be some smarter ways that I think larger conventions can manage like overcrowding and dealing with people queuing overnight and stuff like that. And I think and also possibly maybe running the monopoly on people getting access to some of these larger panels. But the last celebration they did, was it a lottery system, wasn't it, Mark, or something?
It was.
As a punter who was sat at home watching the YouTube stream, I saw all the panels I wanted to see, pretty much.
Yes.
But how was it on the ground where you were? And was there just general kind of like acceptance that was a fair system, or did it not work as I think people expected?
When it got announced, so sort of not that long before the actual event, people were very nervous, and because they didn't want people queuing outside again, and sort of all the issues that they've had in the past of like massive queues. Chicago, I think the security at Chicago said straight away, well, that's not going to happen. We're not having that here. Not a viable thing. So they had to come up with something different. I think they trialled it at New York Comic Con. We don't really do the panels particularly at New York, so it wasn't something that we had to test out. I think it worked out okay. I mean, most people got pretty much what they wanted. It's tough. I mean, you make a really good point, and you've said it on a previous episode, when you've been going to these shows for a few years, it's when you've seen most of the people you want to see, it's not such a burning thing to be in the room. I mean, I was running the podcast stage, so I didn't get a chance to, I did get into the main room. I took a walk around it early on in the show, and that was the only time I went into the main hall, and that was fine. But lottery system's good, yet no one's ever going to get everything they want, and we live in a world where if people don't get what they want, generally they kick off and moan and bleat and complain. From what I could see, at Chicago at least, people seemed pretty happy. I mean, the Wi-Fi there was pretty good, to be fair. So you could, if you wanted to. If you couldn't get into a panel, at least you could sit down and see it. I think it is in the moment you want to be in the room. They're doing a 40th anniversary Empire panel. I'm sure if Celebration runs this year, they'll do one. They can't not. So that's a panel that if I was there, I'd want to be in that room for that one. But in all honesty, over the course of a 4-day event, that's probably the only one I can think off the top of my head. I've really got to be in the room for that one. Because, like you say, you sat at home in the comfort of your living room, your headphones on, a cup of tea and a plate of biscuits or whatever, and you watch it, you will have seen far clearer than I would in the room. You'll have heard it far clearer. You'll absorb it much easier. You do these panels, especially for people like Panther Tracks who are a news site, you're there for the info. You're listening out for little snippets of info. Also, as a punter going to the show, you're there as a fan, so you want to be in the room, you want to get the buzz of the room and the excitement. I was in the room in Anaheim when they showed the Force Awakens trailer. I'll never forget it. It was an absolutely amazing moment, and obviously I was doing Jedi News. I was stood next to James, and we just looked at each other and pretty much burst into tears and gave each other a hug. You can see us hugging on the My Saga video that came out recently, so which is kind of funny, complete fluke. We just happened to be in the background, yeah. So there's moments like that you can't trade for anything. That's only going to happen once. In retrospect, any panel that you ever saw with Carrie Fisher, you wouldn't trade that for anything. But generally, yeah, Alan makes a really good point. Reducing numbers for future celebrations, I can't imagine Reed and Lucasfilm and Disney wanting to do that, as safety conscious as it is. Virtual queues, though, is a great idea. Yeah. That's a really good idea. The other events have started doing, that you can work out a system for queuing that means you're not queuing forever. You turn up at a certain time and you're wheeled in and sit down. But again, we've talked about it over the last few episodes. The whole social distancing thing is going to make big conventions like a Celebration where you've got 50, 60, 70,000 people together. At the moment, I don't see it as being viable.
No, I mean, I think... Yeah, I suppose it all depends upon the organisers' kind of perception of how their attendees feel about social distancing at the point whereby they need to kind of put these processes in place. There is something to be said that I think, and I remember this mainly from the first Celebration in Europe in London, and actually the second one as well. I can remember literally going from one panel and then having to run to the next just to start queuing up for the next panel. And so you don't really get to see as much of a show floor. You're kind of constantly going from one panel to another panel, which is great because, I mean, I saw tons of panels in both of those, more than I did in the later ones. But, I mean, if I think you can kind of take almost the stress of having to queue. For instance, okay, if you know you're going to get a space for, let's say, the next Mark Hamill panel, then it's like, okay, well, that's cool, but I know I don't want to sit up in the gods. I want to sit as close as I can, so I'm still going to kind of try and arrive 2 hours early because I want to get to the front. But if they were to literally do proper virtual queuing and seat allocation, so it's like, right, you've got 2 spaces. So it's like you can take you and your partner, because to be fair, most people are with at least one friend or a partner or something.
Yeah.
And you don't want it to be just like, right, I've got a ticket, but you've got to wait outside kind of thing. And it says, right, this is your seats. I suppose what that can do for certain venues, you can have different entrances and exits, so there's less people, interaction in that area. And then also like people won't even necessarily need to queue up. They just know, a bit like when you're boarding like an airplane, seating starts at like 10 minutes before, 15 minutes before. After 15 minutes, you can't get in, kind of thing. So then everybody will be there. But then it gives people the chance to go, right, actually, we've got an hour and a half to kill now, so we can go and get some food, or we can go and queue up for Funko Pop or whatever. So I just think possibly the use of time, I think, more than anything. Because, you hear about, like, the people who kind of queued up for the San Diego Hall H panel for Force Awakens. That was the last thing on the day. They slept overnight and queued up basically most of the day before. I then had to sit through all the other panels before they could see the Force Awakens. As much as I want to see that, that's a waste of a day. If you're flying in from the UK to Anaheim or Chicago, stuff like that, you want to get the most bang for your buck in terms of the experience that you can get out of these conventions without having to feel like you're kind of compromising your enjoyment because you're wanting to kind of go to these panels. I mean, the other thing is, like I say, maybe they need more viewing rooms or just communal areas where people can kind of watch, outside. At the London XL, they had the big screens outside, which they actually showed A New Hope on in the evening.
Yes.
But if you had screens in that kind of courtyard area, which is showing the panels, and not necessarily the main panel, but actually the main panel or celebration stage or what have you.
Be like Glastonbury, wouldn't it? We're going to go over to the such and such tent for whoever, and then we're going to go over to such and such.
And I think that was obviously with Celebration Europe 3. You had and similarly Anaheim and Chicago, you had the Star Wars show stage as like almost the central part of the floor, and then obviously they're showing kind of stuff and what have you from some of the different panels. That's good because then people can kind of catch a little bit and what have you, and I think it just makes it more inclusive rather than it kind of being a really exclusive kind of I didn't get into this panel, but I'm going to make sure I get into the next one. I mean, because I can remember London, there's people who queued overnight for, I think, the first 1 or 2 main panels. That was the Rogue One, was that Last Jedi? Rogue One, yeah.
London, yeah. Celebration,
yeah. So that was, the Rogue One kind of panel, and people queued up overnight. But then there wasn't that many, and actually a lot of people who kind of rocked up at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning got wristbands and got in to see the panel. I don't think you really need to stress for that, really, do you? To have to get up. I mean, because like a bit like you, I was kind of running the 4 Clubs One Force booth for Celebration Europe 3, and I managed to get into a couple of panels. One of them was because it was Doug Chan, and it happened right next door. Yeah. And I literally just kind of.
It was that behind the scenes stage?
Yeah, behind the scenes stage. And I'll tell you what, I wish I'd paid more attention to that stage, because that is definitely, I think, for somebody who's been to more than a couple of celebrations, that's definitely where you want to get for more juicy information. But also there was a solo panel, which was kind of like a solo preview panel, which went into kind of like the closing ceremony, and that was the only panel I saw. But I think that's also the one that wasn't streamed. Yeah. So that was the only one I went to, and that was me getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we had an apartment on that main boulevard, so it was just a case of shorts and t-shirt, cap, run downstairs, get the wristband, then go back up to bed for another couple of hours. But still, it kind of like, it's disruptive, and I don't think you need that. If you've got an app, and everything's got an app these days, just click the view button or the queue button. And I think also what they need to do is they need to really think about that aspect, because if they say, right, at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, all the panels are going to be live for virtual queuing, the app's going to crash. So what they need to do is they go, okay, well, it's a lottery system. So 3 weeks before the actual event, if they can, because of scheduling, the virtual queuing system goes live, and then it closes 2 weeks before. So then it doesn't mean that just because you're first in line to get that virtual queue, you're guaranteed a seat. Then it means that the app's not going to crash. And also, again, there's no stress and kind of worry and people kind of moaning about the app not working online, because actually if they've got like a week or 2 week window to actually put in all their entries, obviously it's calculated in the background later on, then again, that works. I don't think it needs to feel so immediate all the time. Sorry, that went on ages.
No, you made a lot of really good points. I mean, there's so many things to consider But given what's going on in the world right now, it's definitely something that Reed Lucas from Disney, the fans, have to give serious consideration to, because we want to get all these events up and running again. We want to be doing the celebration, maybe not this year, but certainly next year, and get things up and running again. So, yeah, it's a tough one.
Hi, this is Dave Chapman, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
We've got one final question for this episode from young Brian in Scotland. I'll put this one to you, Mark. How do we know Chewbacca's real name is actually Chewbacca?
That's a good
question.
That's a stronger question. I mean, I guess basically, if we remember from Solo, and I'm guessing this is like Brian's thinking, is that actually the answer that Chewbacca gave was way longer than obviously the one word Chewbacca. So obviously, I wonder if it was like Chewbacca of so and so, son of blah blah blah, and obviously you just kind of
son of a Rorschach tree, clan, whatever. Blah, blah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's probably doesn't he probably has got at least another name or two at least. I wonder if it's a surname. I wonder if Chewbacca's.
They did with Thrawn, didn't they? Thrawn's name was Mithra.
Hang on a sec. Timothy's going to kill us for not pronouncing it correctly. Mithranyu Nuodo or something like that. Mithranyu.
That's right. Yeah. You listen to Wookiees talk, and it's not quite clear Wookiees can't say ch.
Mm.
There's certain sounds in their vocabulary that aren't there, because I've never heard of maybe Paddington can say stuff like that, but cheese. But most bears, which is where the vocals for Wookiees came from, can't say ch. So that's a really good question.
Yeah.
How do we know Chewie's name is Chewbacca? Han has just been given the surname Han Solo at an airport. He could have just made it up on the spot.
Han could have just come up with that, and Chewbacca went, okay, that'll do. Yeah. Can work with that.
I mean, he didn't, because we know Yoda calls him Chewbacca in Revenge of the Sith, so that doesn't work. But it's a cute answer anyway.
It is a cute answer.
It's a cute answer. Thank you, young Brian from Scotland. So thanks for listening to this week's episode of Making Tracks. If you want to see part of the action and updated on all the latest Star Wars news, check out Phantom Tracks app via the App Store or on your mobile device. You can reach us via email at radio@phantomtracks.com. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Phantom Tracks. Subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. We will be back very soon. Enjoy the rest of your day, Mark.
Thanks, mate. You too.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.